Hello everyone, Pilot Spud here, and today I'm going to go over how to do a cold start on the A320neo and a basic takeoff to get you going. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button down below and make sure to hit the bell notification to get all the latest videos on my channel. I'll also link all my other socials down below so you can check those out as well. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. So basically when you start, in order to get the cold and dark set up, you'd want to spawn at either a gate, which is where I'm at, or any parking area, and you'll spawn in pretty much just like this, and that's how you get that cold and dark startup. So basically, first thing we gotta do is to get the airplane switched on, because as you can see, everything is off at this moment. So first thing you want to do is head over to the overhead panel, and you want to look for the master battery switches right here, 1 and 2. Just want to go ahead and hit both of those on. As soon as you hit both of those on, you'll notice that all the lights start to come on. Next thing we got to hit is the external power. Make sure that is turned on. As you see the batteries, you got 28.5 U's on there, and you'll hear that the air conditioning and everything is starting to flow inside the cabin. And next thing we gotta do is, once you got those on, is set on the nav lights and then turn strobe lights to automatic. Basically whenever the plane is on, nav lights have to be on at all times. After that, we can go down to the main controls down here. You want to get your lights, so you can turn on your Pfd display brightness, which is going to be these guys up here. I like to turn those all the way up. Autopilot panel light brightness control, you can turn that up or down depending on the situation and the lighting. You have more light controls down here, so we got the floodlights, and we also have the integrated lighting as well to get these all lit up down here. Once the aircraft is started, you can go ahead and call up ATC to get the jetway connected. I highly recommend, if you are playing on Xbox, to get a keyboard and a mouse just to make things, it'll make things a lot easier. Also, if you don't have a keyboard, the best way you can get ATC is just to click on the left thumbstick, go up to the little air traffic controller tab right here, and then we can go to tune onto the ground services, tune onto the ground, usually the first one, and request the jetway. And as you can see, it is coming in at this moment. And then basically, if when the jetway is being connected, you can turn off the safety master warning, because the door alert was going off, so just get rid of that. Always just turn that off. Okay, and also you also have your Pfd brightness, which is this guy right here, so if you want to turn that down, increase it, and same thing with the left display. Same thing over there, and you'll find the same controls over here. And I'd say at this point, you can go ahead and turn your non-smoking on. And we go down here, make sure everything's out. So I already have a basic flight plan installed. I'll go over a separate video on how to actually get this whole thing working down here, because this thing is a whole thing on its own right here for sure. So it is a whole other topic that I'll get into. But for the moment, just getting into the basic startup procedure. So basically, but once you do have your flight plan, I'm doing a basic flight to EHAM, just Amsterdam, and our flight level I picked was flight level is 20,000. So we're going to be doing, set your altitude up like there. So basically, as you're getting, boarding and everything like that, basically just want to input all the autopilot stuff in here, get your flight director on, which just brings up this little green flight director right here, And you can turn on, I like to do constraints, but this is up to your discretion, whatever you want to use. I like constraints because you can see it gives you the actual data of the altitudes you're supposed to be at for these certain waypoints, your SIDS or your stars. So that's always good. I always like to have that on. And let's see, so basically once you get all that basically set up, get your flight level, you can set your barometric pressure. Usually you can get that from the ATC or any METAR charts that you have if you're using SimBrief. I usually use SimBrief or Station Weather app. That basically just gives you all the information that you need for basically all the information you need for weather, wind, all that. So we're just going to leave that alone for right now, but basically whatever you get, whatever you clear from ATC, just go ahead and input that in, but we're just going to leave that at standard for right now. And basically once everything is all set, the main thing is once we want to get the real systems online, you want to go over to the master APU. So we want to hit this, let this run for about 3 seconds, and once the 3 seconds is done, then we want to go ahead and hit the APU starter. And then you'll hear in the back of the plane, APU is this guy right here, the auxiliary power unit. You'll hear this starting to spool up. Basically just let that go. And then we will see we gotta wait for this little available light. So once that hits available, we're pretty much ready to start the APU bleed. And available light is on, so we're now gonna go over to the APU bleed, which is right here in the middle next to the engine bleeds and below the packs. So let's go ahead, APU bleed is on, and once the APU bleed is on, you can turn off the external power. And then what I like to do is to turn on all my fuel pumps. So basically anything that's white on the overhead, just basically get rid of those. So if it's white, turn it on. Let's get our fuel pumps going. And once our APU is running, fuel pumps are ready, then basically we're ready for pushback. And then once you're ready for pushback, just hit the beacon lights to on. That lets the ground crew know that you're ready for taxiing and ready for engine start. And the beacon lights, if you're wondering, are that right there. There's always one on top and there's always one at the bottom. That just lets anyone know if there are any ground crew around. That lets you know that we're ready to start engines, because nobody wants to be anywhere near those when those start up. So once that's ready, everything's looking good, and we are ready for pushback. And to get pushback, obviously, like I mentioned before, if you're on the keyboard, it makes things a lot easier, just because you can just hit Shift and P. If you don't have a keyboard, just go ahead and bring up your ATC, and you can always get the let's see here, it's not showing up, but basically I think it's because we haven't filed the IFR, but basically we'll just get the pushback ready. Basically once we're ready for pushback 2, you can go ahead and turn on the seatbelt sign. Obviously this is just a very basic startup approach, and obviously there's a lot more to go into if you're doing a full flight, but I'll cover all that stuff, especially if we're doing like, the MCDU stuff, because this stuff, I'd say, is probably the most difficult part of setting up the Airbus, especially in the default version. It's not as complicated as the A320neo mod, but nonetheless. So once the tug is basically hitched up to the wheel, then you can go ahead and disengage, turn the parking brakes off, and then you want to go down to the engine mode, select that to start, and then turn on, once ground is clear, go ahead and start engine master number 2. And you'll see that as the N1 starts to spool up, that's how you know we're all good to go. And obviously this won't start unless you have your fuel pumps turned on. Watch that starting up here. other trick that I like to do as well is once you bring up your ATC window, you'll get this little object right here. The way to figure it out is if you want to turn out right, obviously just hit the right, and that'll turn the aircraft going back. So basically, if you want to head out right, turn right. If you want to go left, it'll push the front of the aircraft in that direction. So if you want the front of the aircraft to go right, then hit the right. If you want it to go to the left, then hit the left. It takes a bit of time getting used to getting the timing correctly, but I'm still struggling with it, obviously. And you hear the hydraulics pumping in, which is that sound to let you know everything is working. Let's go ahead and stop the pushback. And once pushback is stopped, go ahead and engage our parking brake once again and just monitor. So once engines are idle, once the first engine's idle, you can go ahead and start engine master 1. Everything is looking good. See the N1 going up there. Next thing is basically once engines are ready, to do a flaps 1 is pretty much the standard. Depending on the weather, if it is wet and a little stormy, then I would suggest flaps 2, but for most flaps configurations for takeoff, I would always suggest 1. So once you have your flaps 1, go ahead and arm speed brakes, ground spoilers. Next thing we want to do is that once we're all set, you want to go ahead and turn off the APU master and APU bleed, since the engines are pretty much powering the aircraft at this time, so we don't need to worry about any of the APU or anything else. Once we get that, go ahead and turn on your taxi lights, runway turn lights, and wing lights are only really for checking for de-icing. So if you can check here, obviously we can check for any icing buildup on the wings, which doesn't look like there isn't any, so we don't need this right now. And once everything's all set, remember to switch the engine mode back to normal. Go ahead and disengage the parking brake, and we are all set for taxi. Center line here. And a good way to keep an eye on your ground speed while you're taxiing to wherever you need to go. The ground speed will be right here. You want to keep it about under 20 knots, 20 ground speed, or about 15. That's usually the rule of thumb for pretty much all airports. And this one we had a flight filed for, I believe it is runway 9, so we're just going to taxi over there. So just keep an eye on your speed right here. really good example is now we're getting a bit of rain. We can go ahead and turn on the wipers. And since we're going to be taking off into some clouds here, I would recommend that we probably do anti-icing, because you don't want to build up any ice on takeoff. Usually if you're going into clouds with moisture and colder weather, it's pretty much a general rule of thumb just to throw on the anti-icing. I always like to double check making sure everything is all set. And obviously if you're on Xbox, if you want to use the rudders, obviously left trigger, turn left, right trigger, will turn you right on your rudders. We basically use rudders to rudder controls to control the aircraft on the ground. Line up here, and always before you enter an active runway, you always want to stop. Wait for ATC to give us clearance, but since we're not using ATC today, just imagine that they've given us clearance. Go ahead and throw on the landing lights, strobes to automatic, and we're going to turn our takeoff, our nose light to takeoff. Go ahead and go forward. Always pre-flight, pre-departure, I always like to double check, make sure everything's all good. So parking brake set, ground spoiler is armed, flaps 1 for takeoff. Let's do auto brake set to max. That's usually whenever you do a takeoff, always set your auto brakes to max. Flight level is going to be 200. All the lights are all set. APU's off. Everything's all good, and then you're pretty much ready to go. Go ahead, turn off the parking brake, increase power to about 50%, monitor engines, and then we're ready for flex takeoff. And flex is just right down there. So I'm going to apply a little bit of forward pressure on the stick to keep the plane down. Once you pass 100 knots, you can let go. We're about to hit our V1 speed. Once you hit your V1 speed, you can rotate. Keep it at about a 10-degree pitch. Gears up. I just want to follow that flight director, make sure it lines up to our station right here. Go ahead and hit our autopilot. Basically just waiting to hit the 10,000 mark, and once we basically hit over 10,000, that's when we can disengage, turn off all the lights and everything, and then we're pretty much on your way to heading to your flight level. Look of the River Thames down there, and downtown London. And now that we're above 10,000, we can go ahead and turn off our landing lights, retract them. Lights are off, and we can go ahead and disarm ground spoilers and turn off our auto brakes. And obviously I'll be going over more of an in-depth view of IFR departures, but this is just basically mainly a startup tutorial on how to get the plane pretty much on and just off the ground. I'll be going over more in-depth tutorials on how to get more of these flight plans, how to implement it into the MCDU, and obviously how the MCDU plays a part in getting up everything, making sure everything up here is all working the way it should be. But I hope this tutorial has helped you get a good start on the basics of starting procedures in the A320. I'll be making more videos for more in-depth guides on the MCDU ILS approaches and pretty much anything else you might need help with. If you're having any troubles getting the A320 started, please let me know. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, happy flying, and I'll see you soon.